Evening, this is Dave T1963. It's been a while since I posted a video, but I see everyone's kind of getting their gear together, and traditional archery's kind of caught on a lot, and I see so many questions about what arrow shaft sizing's best. Should you go light? Should you go heavy? What kind of inserts? Fletching? All that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to give you some old school information that used to be commonly accepted that kind of fell to the wayside as everyone started. Sorry about the black, I've been pulling arrows out of my target, been out shooting. But since everyone started chasing after speed, when the compound bows first came out, that was the main thing boasted about was their speed. But everyone was shooting 50% let off and pretty heavy arrows. But because speed became such a critical factor for folks, people went lighter and lighter and lighter on their arrow weight, and also to smaller and smaller broadheads and fletching. And so now we see a whole host of things that are now almost necessary because we chose to chase that rabbit. And here's what I'm going to say, the big thing: bare shaft tuning. Back when I got into traditional archery, bare shaft tuning was very seldom ever even talked about outside of target archery. And the reason being is we use adequate fletching. Here's the thing, I see people talking about, well, if your arrow's flying down like this when it hits an animal, it's going to lose all of its energy. Well, if you don't use adequate fletching, you had better do the absolute best tune you can, and then get rid of all your human flaws in your release and stuff. Because you will have nothing to stabilize your arrow once it leaves your bow. So that high speed, lightweight arrow and small fletching is what dictates the absolute need for precision arrows flying out of your bow. And here's the reality: if you use adequate fletching, 5 foot after that arrow leaves your bow, 10 foot, it's flying straight. If it's not, you're not using adequate fletching. And so when you use adequate fletching, all you need to do in spine is, does your arrow impact straight in line with where you're aiming? If it's too weak, it's going to fly off to the right. If you're shooting right-handed, if it's too weak, it'll fly to the right. If you're using too stiff a shaft, it's going to fly too far to the left. But your arrows are going to straighten out. That like I said, we used to understand this back in the day. But if you want perfect arrow flight, use bigger fletching. Yeah, you might lose 10 to 15 feet per second. But if you're shooting 20 yards and under, which is the reasonable range for something like a whitetail with their skittishness and their reaction time and their vision, if you're shooting past 30 yards for sure with a compound, then you're misjudging that animal's ability. But if you're using adequate fletching, your arrow's not going to be impacted that much out to 20 yards with traditional, 25 yards, and 30 to 35 yards with the compound. You're not going to be giving up that much speed, and if you use adequate fletching, your arrow's going to impact straight, especially if you put a helical twist on it. That's just aerodynamics. You don't need a bare shaft to come out and correct itself quickly if you use adequate fletching. Like I said, if you're way over spined, it's going to veer to the left a little bit, simply because by the time it straightens out, your fletching takes control of it. It's already moving in that direction, but it's going to hit the target square. Same with if it's weak spined, it's going to veer this way. And how you adjust that is with spine or cutting your arrow off or increasing or decreasing point weight. You can do all that, but you don't have to bare shaft test, folks. Use adequate fletching, and if your arrows fly a straight path to where you're hitting, you're tuned. The only reason why you got a barrel shaft and paper tune shaft in this is when you're trying to push extremes. Fletching steers and straightens out your arrow. Pure and simple. That is the number one best way to straighten your arrow out and to ensure it hits the target square is to use adequate fletching with a helical twist. Same reason why they use rifling in a rifle barrel. Okay? Everything else is subservient to that. If you use small fletching, you better have the best consistent release. You better have arrows that clear the bow cleanly and correct itself very quickly. And you better be able to do that shot after shot consistently under all conditions. And I'm telling you right now, I would say 999 out of 1,000 archers cannot consistently produce an arrow under all hunting conditions consistently time after time after time. There's going to be variations in your release, in your draw length, in your form. All those things are going to come into play. Wind drift, all those kind of things. If you use adequate fletching, that is the number one way to overcome all that. It may not be perfect, but it's far better to overcome it with fletching than to rely on being perfectly concise consistently time after time in every other area of your aspect. So go ahead and barrel shaft tune if you want. What I'm telling you is it's absolutely unnecessary if you use adequate fletching. Just make sure your fill points and your broadheads fly a straight line to where you're looking. Okay? Your brain or your sights, if you adjust your sights, will make up for any 5 or 10 feet per second that you may give up with arrow flight. You can give up the same 5 to 10% with a crappy release, or dropping your bow arm, or collapsing on the shop. All those things have to be precisely perfect if you're not using adequate fletching. It's a known fact that feathers correct an arrow better than plastic. Okay? Use what vein you want. A 5-inch plastic vein is a hell of a lot better than a 2-inch vein. Okay? And it's better than a 3-inch vein, and it's better than a 4-inch vein. If you put a little helical twist on it, it's going to be even better as stabilizing your arrow and getting consistent straight flight, which will increase penetration also. If you use feathers, it's going to even make that far better. These are known things that we've known I've been at this for almost 50 years, traditional archery, and we've known these things from the very beginning. We just forgot them as we began to chase other variables that we thought were more important. You know, speed of an arrow, the honest truth is if you use an adequate weight hunting arrow, let's say 500 grains, if you're shooting an 70-pound bow, I think is the standard for compounds. If you're shooting a 70-pound bow, first of all, if you want to get the best performance and the most energy, you should be shooting probably a 700 grain arrow. If you shoot a 700 grain arrow with adequate fletching out of a modern day compound, you'll be lucky to get over 200 feet per second. Lucky to get that. Okay? With a traditional bow, shooting 60 pounds, which I'd say 50 to 60 pounds, probably somewhere the norm in there. You're talking 500 to 600 grain. You're not going to get as much penetration as a 70-pound compound with a 700 grain arrow, but a 60-pound bow or a 50-pound bow shooting a 500 or a 600 grain arrow using adequate fletching will kill anything in the North American continent for sure, cleanly. It'll be a far more stable arrow. You'll get the most out of your performance out of that particular bow. More of the energy will go into the arrow. So, you know, I'm not saying you have to go back to old school known things, but don't just throw them out. I'll tell you what, I would much rather take a 50-pound bow, compound or traditional, with an adequate, at least 10 grain per inch arrow. So, you know, anywhere from a 500 to a 700 grain arrow with a good cut on contact broadhead, With 3 5-inch feathers with a slight helical, I'll take that over any other combination of bow, arrow, and stuff that you can put together for killing animals under hunting conditions. Now, yes, I understand if you're shooting target archery at known distances, standing up using standard normal form that's repeatable time after time, and you've done enough practice to where your release, your bow arm, you're non-collapsing, you're using back muscles all precisely, all consistently, all the time, then yes, smaller fletching, bare shafting, lighter arrows makes sense. The reason why a lighter arrow makes sense is because of the human ability to judge distances. Most of us suck at it, to be honest with you. You start some of us might get good on a target range in our backyard judging distance, but as soon as you put uphill, downhill, kneeling, leaning, shooting under something, shooting over something, our perceptions can get out of whack pretty quick. So with target archery, shooting a lighter arrow compensates for the human error factor in judging distance. In hunting scenarios, larger fletching compensate for all the human-induced errors of shooting, whether it's inconsistent form, inconsistent anchor, collapsing, not using your back muscles, having a pluck, or an inconsistent release, And something else that just drives me nuts is this unnatural crap of releasing an arrow and coming back to your shoulder. No way in any world is energy that goes straight to a target going to dictate a curved release. That is induced. You do that on purpose. Ideally, when you're at anchor, if you're wanting a crisp release, your finger should go forward and your hand shouldn't move much, or if it does, it should go straight back. Not away from the face, and certainly not following your chin around to the back of your neck and on top of your shoulder. That's all manufactured crap. It's not natural, and it goes against the physics of, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If an arrow's going this way, your elbow should go that way, not around. That whole around thing is for target archery, once again. And in a hunting condition, very seldom are you ever going to be standing perfectly upright, perfectly with your feet shoulder width apart, perfectly with your feet positioned exactly the same way every time in regards to orientation on the target. You're in a lot of cases, you're not going to be able to get all the way to full draw. What if you hit a stick? What if you hit the back of the tree? What if you hit your bridge? There's all kinds of things that can go on with hunting that don't happen on a target archery range. So you can choose one of two paths. You can choose to be a perfect archer every single time and work on and perfecting your consistency and overcome all the things that hunting and nature throw at you. Or you can use larger fletching, heavier arrows to compensate for all those errors and inflictions that happen while you're hunting. Like I said, we used to know this stuff. No one was shooting super lightweight arrows outside of target archery for hunting. No one was shooting lighter weight. My gosh, when I first got into archery, everyone was shooting 60, 70 to 80 pound traditional bows. And I'm only 5'10", I weigh 185 pounds, and I'm 62 years old, and I can draw a 65-pound bow easily. It's very reachable within the normal structure of a male adult. If you can't pull back 50 pounds, you need to go get testosterone injections or something. But I see people wanting to go to 40-pound bows now. And why? 40-pound bows don't put forth near the energy of a 60-pound bow. And all it takes is a little consistent practice to be able to handle a 60-pound bow. Then you can shoot a heavier arrow and use adequate fletching, get a faster arrow going at a quicker speed, carrying more mass weight, more kinetic energy, and better penetration. We're taking the wrong route. Going lighter weight bow draw, lighter weight arrows, and relying on precision bear shaft tuning for hunting is the exact opposite of how we should be searching for our hunting gear. We should be looking for the most reliable, consistent, that handles different fluctuations in our ability as archers, wind conditions, judging distance, and all that. Use the best arrow that gets the best penetration, and use an adequate bow to give you the speed, not a lighter arrow. That's absurd. Let's get more speed by using a lighter arrow, or let's get more speed on the arrow by using a heavier poundage bow. Only one is going to produce more kinetic energy, and it's not the lighter arrow. So once again, there's all kinds of things out there with archery now, and I'm not knocking all of it, but what I'm saying is, don't forget some of the traditional things we've known all along, that man has known for hundreds, thousands of years. That a heavyweight bow, shooting a heavier arrow with adequate fletching under unideal but very realistic hunting conditions is a far superior weapon than a precision lightweight arrow out of a lightweight bow with minimum fletching is outside of very precise controlled factors. It's simple in my mind. I don't understand where we're going with some of the advice I see out there. Get you a heavy arrow, put some good adequate, at least 4-inch, I would say feather fletching. If you hunt in an area where there's a lot of rain, then use plastic, maybe bump up to 5-inch, put a little offset in it, or with feathers a little helical, just like the rifling in a barrel, and it's going to stabilize that arrow, and you don't have to worry about getting piss poor penetration because your arrow's flying crooked or whatever, unless there's heavy wind. Heavy wind can affect any arrow, but under the majority of conditions, and I hunt in Texas where there's a lot of wind, under the majority of conditions, a heavy arrow, adequate fletching, and a good 50 to 60 pound bow is traditional bow is far superior than what you're seeing the current trends in archery. Anyway, that's my scoop on it. That's my take on it. You're not going to change my mind. Hopefully I'll get you thinking about things a little differently. Dave T1963 out.